Vietnam helicopter attack gave a new perspective on the war America couldn't win. Before watching this video, please hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications for future uploads.
Channel 1 Presents.
The flight is accompanied by the perpetual chop-chop of rotor blades, the confused garble of radios and, more darkly, the intermittent rattle of machine gun fire. It's 1967 and Hueys are crisscrossing the sky above Vietnam. Suddenly, an alarm sounds inside one of the choppers. A plume of smoke pours from the tail of another. Two aircraft are going down, and not where they had planned. The Vietnam War ravaged Southeast Asia for around 20 years, starting in the mid-1950s and lasting until 1975. On one side of the conflict were the Soviet-backed communist forces of the Democratic Republic of Vietnam (DRV) or North Vietnam, supported by the guerrilla fighters of the National Front for the Liberation of Vietnam (Viet Cong). On the other side was the Republic of Vietnam (South Vietnam), backed militarily and ideologically by the United States. The human cost of the conflict was immense. More than 1 million North Vietnamese are believed to have perished in the war, along with 230,000 South Vietnamese and more than 58,000 Americans. The following images illustrate the everyday horrors encountered by U.S. helicopter crews during the fighting. Since their invention near the start of the 20th century, helicopters of increasing sophistication have enhanced our society's ability to communicate and travel. In warfare, helicopters act not only as mobile attack units but fulfill key functions in medical evacuation, search and rescue ops and myriad other tasks. The first military deployment of helicopters dates to World War II when a group of American bombers crash-landed in Burma. Since gliders were unable to get to the crews, they were evacuated using choppers instead. In the next major U.S. conflict, the Korean War, helicopters assisted with medical evacuation and, to a lesser extent, troop deployment and scouting. However, it was not until the Vietnam War that planners realized the full military potential of choppers. In fact, thousands of helicopters were deployed, providing critical air support to ground operations. Indeed, thanks to their mobility, they were well suited to Vietnam's remote, jungle-swathed terrain. Indeed, the Vietnam War was the helicopter war according to the Vietnam Center and Archive, a Texas Tech University project dedicated to documenting the American Vietnam experience. And among the many types of helicopters dispatched to the conflict, the most famous was the American Bell 01 Huey. To some extent, Francis Ford Coppola's film Apocalypse Now immortalized the Huey. Indeed, his depiction of the helicopters soaring into combat to Wagner's Flight of the Valkyries is one of cinema's most memorable scenes. But as one vet writing for Vietnam magazine in 2016 pointed out, the reality of helicopter warfare was quite different. The truth, inevitably, is more compelling, more complicated, and extremely more dangerous, wrote Jerry D. Morlock. Indeed, the grainy footage which supplied the images for this article might not be as dramatic as Apocalypse Now, but it is brooding and unnervingly tense. Shot between February 26 and 28, 1967, near the coast of Quang Ngai Province, it depicts all-1 Hueys and CH-47 Chinooks in combat during Operation Pershing. The footage, shared on the YouTube channel of video publisher Jeff Whitney, is accompanied by the narrated words of Army Specialist Mike Baker. Baker was initially assigned to American Forces Radio and Television in Iran. Those orders were subsequently revoked, however, and he was sent to the Department of the Army Special Photographic Office (DASPO) to serve in Vietnam instead. Before the Vietnam conflict, infantry soldiers have always been called upon to march into war, says Baker in the footage. But now with the new concept of air mobility, units of the 1st Cavalry Division Air Mobile and other military units in Vietnam are airlifted into battle by helicopter. Baker goes on to describe the careful coordination involved in executing the air cavalry attack captured by his cameraman. The first phase involves scouting for Viet Cong, using low-flying Hueys and other reconnaissance vehicles. After the selection of a landing zone LZ, the coordination and planning is completed, said Baker. When the operation is to begin, the LZ is prepared by a combination of ordnance. The assault on the LZ begins with a strike by Chinook helicopters. The strike only lasts for 5 minutes, but is intense and indiscriminate. After the Chinook strike comes an artillery bombardment, and then follows the most vital phase of the operation, landing the soldiers. The troop-carrying craft are led by 2 aerial rocket artillery ships RC armed with 4 dozen rockets. Such a concept of air mobility tactics would fail without the coordination, the planning and timing. However, the operation was far from trouble-free. Towards the end of the footage, it becomes apparent that one of the helicopters has been hit. In fact, Baker himself had been riding in that chopper, and after it was forced to land in a rice field behind enemy lines, the helicopter carrying his cameraman, SFC Billy McBride, was also immobilized during an attempted rescue. Indeed, the 1st Cavalry Division was one of the most dangerous units to serve in. With more than 5,400 men killed in action and a further 26,592 wounded, it had the most casualties of any U.S. division in the Vietnam War. As Baker and McBride found themselves stranded in hostile territory, things must have looked bleak. The crew remained on the ground for approximately 2 hours. However, support came, the men were rescued and the 2 choppers lifted to the LZ and repaired. Baker survived the Vietnam War and has proud memories of his involvement. It was an incredible assignment and I met so many great Americans, he wrote on Jeff Quitney's YouTube channel. I am honored to have served. Likewise, many former vets have warm memories of the chopper crews that accompanied and facilitated their missions. Helicopters were overwhelmingly our only means of transport, resupply, close aerial fire support and medevac, our lifelines to any sustenance, support and succor, wrote Jerry D. Morlock in Vietnam magazine. Morlock added, helicopter crews were our beloved brothers in arms, even if we only knew them from fleeting glimpses of the pilots and crews, their faces covered by helmets and visors, and through short, crisp, businesslike radio transmissions as they risked their lives for us.